The biblical verse that is quoted at the beginning, and the light shone in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not, is the same verse that we've been working with, this now being our third Sunday. Swamiji's just taking it out piece by piece. The beginning, this is the verse that begins, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and everything that was made of that substance, and Jesus himself was manifested from that substance, and that Word was light, and that Word was life, and that life was in everything, and that light shone in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not." It's the sort of beginning basis for the whole discussion of the whole year of all the principles of self-realization. And I like the way Swami writes it, reason recoils from the statement that the light shines in the darkness and the light has no effect on the darkness. I mean, you can think, what kind of darkness is this? But you also think, what kind of light is this? That just doesn't have any effect. And in a real sense, the entire process of coming to the spiritual path, of developing faith in the spiritual path, of having the courage and the intuition to cling to spiritual principles no matter what events of your life challenge those principles, is all about that little phrase. You know, what kind of a light is it? What kind of darkness can't comprehend it? When we do the Festival of Light every week, it's not appropriate in the midst of a Sunday service ritual to stop and expound on various of the sentences that are in there. I have done that on other occasions, and if you're interested in sort of the story behind the story of the Festival of Light, if you go onto our website, the Ananda Palo Alto website, you can find classes that I've given on the Festival of Light. For those of you who come every week, I highly recommend it. It will greatly expand your understanding of what those words mean, because what's encapsulated in the whole Festival of Light is really the whole path of self-realization. Now, the one part of it that I'm thinking of is really this, we speak of the descent of the Spirit, and yet the fact that even though the divine lives among us, either incarnated in human form in the sake of the masters, or simply inherent in every atom of creation, nonetheless, the human mind, identified with matter as the primary reality, and taken in by the obvious evidence of our senses that this world is happening and it's not untrue. The way Master puts it, which is a much more subtle way to say it, it's not as if this world is not real. It's real on its own level, which is from the state of consciousness that we are living, this world is really happening. And it really doesn't serve us to pretend it's not happening. If you meet so-called spiritual people who try to relate to this world by just sort of going through as if it wasn't really there, you don't really see in them the kind of dynamic power and joy that you see in a saint. So as Master puts it, if in a dream, you hit your dream head against a dream rock, you have a dream pain. And it happens on that level, and it's only after you wake up from the dream that you realize it's not happening. I'm sure all of you have had experiences of vivid nighttime dreams. And while you're in your subconscious mind will conjure out of all the building blocks that it has, all the building blocks you've given it of impressions and experiences, it'll conjure up an experience. And if it's a nightmare, you'll start crying out with fear or pain in your nightmare until somebody hears you or until you wake yourself up. And then there's just that moment of, what is really happening, what is not happening in this moment, because on the level of the dream, as long as you're in it, it's real. So as long as we are identified, and that as word I emphasize virtually every week because it's such a valid way to think of it, as long as we identify with this experience. If you're sound asleep, even if you're sleeping next to someone, you can have a bad dream and that other person can be completely oblivious to it. Because it's your own subjective universe that you've identified with. And the person inches away from you, conceivably, can either be having a completely happy other dream or can be sound asleep until you start yelling and thrashing about and so on. And then suddenly there's a change in reality. Suddenly you come back to a shared reality. So we live in this world, we identify with this world, and as long as we imagine that things are happening in the cause and effect, physical plane way that we think they're happening, it doesn't matter how close to us that divinity is, we don't comprehend it. And so it's very easy for us to begin to think that God is far away from us, that the spiritual path is arduous, that this effort takes time, that in the meantime I'm suffering. One of the letters that came to me through the Ananda worldwide website, I've been answering their letters, was this woman trying to reconcile the concept of eternity with the linear nature of spiritual progress, is how she put it. Sort of how did these things go together? The mind just sort of tries like this to find all these pieces. I said, well, the problem here is that spiritual progress is not actually linear. It's not like we don't have something and then suddenly have it. I mean, it's not like we sort of walk all the way like climbing Mount Everest. I have loved to read mountaineering books, where they just struggle and struggle those last few feet and try to get up to the top. And it's definitely an up and down kind of trip. And those of us who are on the spiritual path, you sort of read those things and you think of going up, and then it feels harder the higher you get, and then finally you get to some sort of pinnacle up there like that. But the fact of the matter is, as we become more and more of who we actually are, there's really no sense of distance. There's not even any sense of goal. There's much more a sense of, oh yeah, I forgot. And there's no linear nature to I forgot and now I remember. It's just that when I remember, I wake up out of the dream. But as long as we're in the dream, the light can't penetrate. When you're asleep, if you're a deep sleeper, really doesn't make any difference what's going on around you. I mean, we can even be put into a drug sleep where they can hack up our bodies and we don't even know it. So it's quite possible to have things happen that are happening, but it's only a question of awareness. And so the whole spiritual path, very interestingly, can be just summed up by that word awareness. We become more and more aware. And when you become aware of something, again, you see it's not created. It's just a question of what we know. And that's why in spiritual life, you cannot become lazy and indifferent to any other aspect of life. Yogananda himself describes, and he's sort of playing a game with us, but when he talks in Autobiography of a Yogi about coming to his guru, Sri Yukteswar, he describes himself as having fallen prey to that common delusion that now that I'm a spiritual person, I can be lazy and casual about everything else. Because what difference does it make? And in fact, his guru was extremely demanding, even in very little things. And in fact, one of his guru's dictums was learn to behave. Learn to behave not merely in the spiritual world, but right here in this world. And one of the charming stories in Autobiography of a Yogi is how Sri Yukteswar disciplined Yogananda. Yogananda came to his guru, you remember, with these 6 beautiful cauliflowers that he wanted to give to his guru as a great present, and he hid them under his bed. And then they went out for a walk on the beach, and the master says to him, "Did you remember to lock the back gate?" And Yogananda was in the custom of being casual about things. And no, he forgot to lock the back gate. So Sri Yukteswar, just playing with him, says, well, because of your carelessness, the karma of your carelessness is you're going to lose one of your precious cauliflowers. And this rather humorous scene is then acted out in which this sort of drunken man is seen walking down the street. And Yogananda uses this as a way to explain lots of principles. Sri Yukteswar was able to tune into the vibration of that man's consciousness. The man became like a radio receiving station, which is what we are. Sri Yukteswar projected into that man's mind a deep desire for a cauliflower and some kind of intuitive belief that there might be one in the ashram. So they stood there and they watched this drunken man go to the gate, find it open, go inside, and unerringly go right to Yogananda's room, and as they said later, ignore the gold watch and the money sitting on the table, go under the bed and pull out the cauliflower and go home with it like this. It's just a marvelous story of Sri Yukteswar teaching us lots of things and teaching Yogananda not to be so careless. Now, you think in your mind, what difference does it make? Yogananda was in cosmic consciousness. You know, he knew the thoughts of all men. Why does it matter whether he locked the gate or not? Well, they're teaching us. They're teaching us that the spiritual path is a matter of constant awareness and ever-increasing awareness. And rarely is our inattention justified. Yes, it's possible to transcend everything of this world. There's a story of that Swami tells in the path of Yogananda himself sitting in this room with a couple of the disciples, and he had asked one of the devotees to repaint the room. And Master looks at the room and says, "Isn't it wonderful?" And he painted it all by himself. And Rajasi Janakananda was sitting there, and he looked at the room, and it was clearly completely unpainted. And the disciple who was being praised for painting it, they just sort of looked at each other, and they smiled like this. Because in Master's mind and his bliss state, he'd asked to have it painted, it would be painted, so it was painted. You know? But for him, it was truly a transcendent awareness. His energy was beyond the moment, not beneath the moment. And that's what we have to watch out for in our lives, is that we put a spiritual overlay over what is just carelessness and laziness. And in the Gita commentary, Swami Kriyananda writes to us about spiritual, that this world is made up of three shifting levels of energy. They're called the gunas. The tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic energy. I've mentioned to you at different times, there's certain key concepts in grasping the essence of self-realization that we have to use Sanskrit words for. Tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic are three of those words. Tamasic energy is the darkening quality. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's inert. It just means it pulls us away from spirit. It doesn't take us towards spirit, it just pulls us away from it. And tamasic energy can be rotten food, it can be the desire to sleep, it can be the desire to hurt people, anything that darkens our consciousness. Rajasic energy is just energy moving. Children, for the most part, are very rajasic. You know, instead of going just in a simple way, they'll go up and down and they'll move like this, and they're not really going forward or backward, they're just being rajasic, they're just moving. America is a very rajasic country. Just moves all the time. We do everything in speedy, and you know, you can always tell Americans even in other countries because of how fast they walk as a rule. You know, we're all just very rajasic, we're very in a hurry. When that energy is rightly directed, America is a fantastic country. India has become a little bit tamasic. You know, they're just a little inert, have been. They're becoming nicely rajasic again, because that's what they need. The third quality of energy is sattvic energy, which is calm, divinely inspired, elevating energy. And these three gunas play out at all times. We're always manifesting them all. A true master transcends the three gunas. He's beyond the alternating waves of energy that are creation. We sort of work our way from tamasic, at least into rajasic, and trying to be more sattvic in what we do. Now, the main way we practice working with those three dynamic forms of energy is outwardly, because it's much easier to be able to see and do things, and that's why God created a universe in which we have to work so hard to make things happen. You know, in the astral world, you can just visualize things, they say. You can just project with your thoughts and it happens. Here you have to go out and earn the money, and then you have to buy the rocks, and then you have to carry the rocks over to where you want the fence, and then you have to put the fence up. It's this endless effort to put out energy. And the reason it's there is because, you see, then that allows us to work with these three qualities. Am I just running around in circles without really lifting my consciousness? Am I always just darkening my energy and being tamasic and really not wanting to do anything? Or am I dynamic, but with divinely inspired calmness? And so it's a question of energy, and it's a question of awareness. So we can't define light as merely doing nothing. Light has to be very, very dynamic. It's the force that creates everything. It's the power that makes the universe. And in our lives, that's why Sri Yukteswar with Yogananda, you must remember to lock the gate. Because every little thing is a battle in our consciousness between the dullness of tamasic energy, the restlessness of rajasic energy, and the calm inspiration of sattvic energy. And once we begin to see reality like this, you see every single minute, really literally, every minute of our lives, we get the opportunity to figure out, how can I be where I want to be? This is where Yogananda, spiritually speaking, this is where Yogananda can make the statement. He says, take care of the minutes, he says, and incarnations will take care of themselves. It's a very interesting thought, because we have this idea, this linear idea of spiritual development, and it's not merely that it's going to take all the effort of this lifetime, but it's going to take all those lifetimes in the future, and huff, puff, it just really makes you want to just go to bed and pull the covers up over your head. Although, as one wise woman said, no matter how you feel, it's really not that easy to lie down and die. You lie down and die, and pretty soon you get hungry, pretty soon you have a Charlie horse in your calf, pretty soon you're bored. You just don't die. Something happens. Rajasic energy is what happens. It just sort of moves in, and you want to move again. So we have to live anyway. But rather than sort of imagining this project as being overwhelming, it's really right here. It's right in this minute. How conscious am I? How much dynamic energy am I using? How much awareness do I have? How much of the light which is present within me am I comprehending? Or am I hanging out in, well, let's call it the tamasic darkness, or the rajasic restlessness that obscures that light? And it isn't the light is not affected, it's our capacity to comprehend it. And, there's great forces of real darkness, but they're really just an extension of the little darknesses. And I was starting to say back at the beginning of this, in the Festival of Light, we have that part. Our human griefs, your love alone can mend. See, our human griefs, your love alone can mend. Though eternally rejected, we speak to the Divine Spirit, though eternally rejected, you remain our friend. And that's an introduction to one of the songs that we sing. You remain our friend. Interestingly, the context of that song, which we sing in the Festival of Light, but Swamiji first wrote that song in the oratorio. And the oratorio is the musical expression of the life of Jesus. And he came to the point of the crucifixion of Christ in that story. And he wanted a song that really expressed the crucifixion of Jesus. And the crucifixion of Jesus the song for that is, you remain our friend. And those words, eternally rejected, you remain our friend. On a cross, rejected, though man has turned his back on you, you have never turned your back on us. So when we're saying that in the Festival of Light, the phrase eternally rejected is referring to not every individual. I mean, we have a choice as to at what point we will reject the darkness and begin to comprehend the light. But the light, and the phrase is, expressed in a personified way, in the form of Christ, and the crucifixion of Jesus represents the ultimate rejection by egoic consciousness of the possibility of divine realization. Jesus came as an avatar at that time to those people, and he offered them a complete revolution in the way they were relating to God. And of course, a coterie of disciples comprehended the light. And in this case, it was manifest through a self-realized being who was living there among them. But it also manifests in the way he spoke to them, and the teachings he gave them, and the techniques he taught them, and the meditation practices. Yogananda says that Jesus taught them something very like Kriya Yoga, which is the same meditation that we do. It was a continuation of the same path, because Kriya Yoga, meditation practice, is simply relating properly to the way the divine energy flows within us and cooperating with that divine flow of energy. So therefore, any master who comes to bring light into the darkness, he has to teach Kriya Yoga or something similar. Because he has to teach us, okay, here is the condition of human life, and here is how we can turn inward, escape from the constant rajasic distraction of the senses, and go into the sattvic, uplifting energy of the inner current and perceive the light. Escape the darkness and comprehend the light. So Jesus came with that message, but the hold, individually and in a society as a whole, the grip that darkness has on our consciousness has to be profoundly and deeply respected. And we have to recognize that we have to meet it with a counter force of the same. That's why Jesus, he was no wimp. He was no blessed Jesus, meek and mild. You can count on that. He also had to be dynamically joyful, because who would want to follow someone who says, yeah, things are bad, and believe me, if you follow me, they'll get even worse? I mean, who would do that? He has to, what is it that attracts us? We meet someone who has all those qualities that we long for: love, freedom. And how does love and freedom exist? With laughter, with smiles, with lightheartedness. How can you tell when someone is in love? My, you really seem happy today, don't you? Because you're comprehending something so glorious to you. So Jesus came with all of that. But darkness is so strong that there was a whole other element of his own people who all they could see is what they would lose if this man's point of view was carried. He was a tremendous threat to the power and the position and the wealth and the rigidity of mind that so many of those people had at that time, and the corruption and the money that they were earning by being in a position of power and leadership. And Jesus came in and he said, you don't need this temple, you don't need these priests, you don't need these rituals, you don't need these offerings, you don't need these laws. I mean, that's very scary. That's what happens to all of us, isn't it? We read in there that, well, you know, you don't need your money, you don't need your house, you don't really need your relationships. And you think, no way. I don't believe that. And so we try to sort of parse it out. I'll take a little of this and a little of that. I'll tithe 1%. You know, I'll just do a little bit here and there, because it feels like, it doesn't feel like light. It feels like darkness. We get very, very confused in that. So in the life of Christ, it acted out so dramatically that nobody could miss it. You know, Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, the Roman cohort coming, they grab him, they take him away, they torture him, they kill him. I mean, man, you just can't really make it much more explicit than that. Here's the light, here's the darkness, boom, like that. And apparently, the darkness ate the light. That's what it looks like, doesn't it? But what happened is that Jesus resurrected, and he just laughed at the light, and the light comprehended him not. It even says in the Bible, when the rock was rolled away and the tomb was empty, that the rumor went around that Jesus' disciples had hidden the body. And a lot of people believed that they'd stolen it and hidden it so that it would look like something really special had happened. The darkness simply can't comprehend the light. Just can't imagine. In 1976, Ananda Village was, half of our land was Ananda Village up in Sierra Nevada. We had 900 acres of land, 450 of it was just blackened by this forest fire. We had about 25 homes in the community area, and like 21 of them went to the ground. And then a few weeks later, the 22nd one was smashed by a tree. It was sort of missed by the fire, so this big oak fell on it. You know, it was sort of like, oh, God said, one of them is still standing. like that. I mean, it was just almost ridiculous that that would happen. Turned out the fire was caused by a faulty county machine. Oh, dollar signs left and right. I mean, we were nearly wiped out at that point. And our neighbors, who some of them were also burned, they were so excited, we're going to have a big lawsuit. Ananda lost more than anyone. Let's all join in. Think of all the millions we'll get, like this. And as a community, we thought about it, and Swami Kriyananda thought about it, and he said, he didn't use the word karma, but he said, that's not free money. Somebody pays for it. If we take that money, we're just really, as he put it, taking our bad luck out on our neighbors. So he wrote a letter to the Board of Supervisors. He said, I know you all are wondering whether or not Ananda is going to sue or not. We're part of this county. We belong to this county. There's no reason why you should pay for what happens to us. And we never did sue. And our neighbors sued. And as Swami points out, we recovered very nicely, and many of them who got lots of money never really recovered at all, because the mindset wasn't there to recover properly. But the point of all of this is, the rumor still exists in Nevada County that they paid us off under the table. I mean, the only way people could understand our not taking that money was that we got more money by doing it another way. Even the idea that you wouldn't take it was incomprehensible to the dark. But for us, it was the karmic law. Nobody owes us. It happened to us for good reason. And all this insurance, somebody should prevent it. Somebody has to pay. Oh, look, I get this. I mean, I'm not criticizing if you find yourself in a position like that. Everybody has to make their own decisions. But as a community, we knew where there is dharma, there is victory. Where there is right action, there is victory. It's not where there is money, there is victory. Or where there is an insurance settlement, there is victory. There is victory when there is right consciousness. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness doesn't understand that. And every day in our lives, we're battling that little fight within ourselves. I was talking about in the song that we sing, although eternally rejected, because endlessly throughout creation is the story of being separated from God, and then, as I said before, like the river seeking the sea, finding your way back to God. And that's a drama that goes on eternally. Once we step outside of it, we just sort of see it as waves on the ocean. The ocean never stops. There's not a point at which you can say to the ocean, just calm down, for heaven's sakes, just stop all these tides and all these currents and all these waves. It doesn't say, oh, oops, and just stop. It's just endless. Endlessly moving, because creation itself is vibration. It's the word, it's the Om, it's always moving. And that endlessly moving vibration is not stillness. By its very nature, it rejects that stillness. That's what it means when we say, although eternally rejected, you remain our friend. You remain our closest companion. And your love is freely given to us. And we always have that choice of picking up that freedom. And even within ourselves, we don't have to, everything that is cosmic is also infinitesimal. Within ourselves, no matter how often we have turned away from the light, all we have to do is turn back. Because even though eternally rejected, it remains. That's the most extraordinary thing about our relationship with Spirit, is that it just doesn't make the slightest difference. Now, to mix up the images a little bit, as Master puts it, even though a room be in darkness for thousands of years, as soon as you turn the light on, then the darkness vanishes as if it was never there. And as long as we refuse to comprehend the light, in the moment that we comprehend it, all that lack of understanding, which is to say ignorance, just disappears. Isn't that so? If you didn't know something, and then you know it, once you know it, you always know it. I was thinking, because I'm looking at some of the school teachers here, learning to read. All those letters are just a jumble on the page. They mean nothing. All of a sudden they form themselves into words, and ever after they're always words. Once the comprehension is there, the light is with us eternally. And you see, the light never goes away. We just refuse to accept it. And once we accept it, we see this was never linear. This was never an arduous climb. This was merely a question of expanding our awareness, opening our hearts, and receiving. God bless you.